And I want to take a moment to welcome everyone to the November meeting of the Equity Advisory Group. This is shockingly the last meeting of the year for us, and it's been a busy year, and we have great presentations for you tonight. My name is Rose McKinney James, and I am pleased to continue to be your facilitator for this meeting. And I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that as we get into November, it is Native American Heritage Month. I think it's always important for us to recognize the contributions of those who have made such a difference in our communities. With that, let me move to our usual opening, which is always to take a moment out to reflect on safety. And our safety moment tonight will be provided by Amy Nichols, who is an EAG member. And so, Amy, let me invite you to offer the safety moment for tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Rose. And for today's safety moment, I would like to invite people to filter through your filters. So on the screen, I have two different types of filters. On the left side, you see an HVAC filter. On the left is a dirty filter. It can hold bacteria, mold, and dust. It can also increase the risk of fire. In terms of how often you should replace your filters, you should follow your manufacturer advice. But given how smoky and how much a smoke event can deposit on a filter, you should probably change even more often than in manufacturer advice if there's been a lot of smoke during the summer. And then this is a kind of a nerdy, a jargony term, but the reason that a MERV 14 plus is recommended, MERV is a measure of the size of stuff that gets trapped in your filter. And the higher the MERV rating, the higher the MERV number, the smaller the stuff that your filter, your HVAC filter traps. And so at 14 plus, you're also filtering out harmful chemicals like smoke, nitrogen oxides, and all of that good stuff. And when I say all that good stuff, I really mean all that bad stuff. Remember to clean your filter, your HVAC filter. And then also on the right-hand side, you have what is this pretty standard Brita filter. So activated charcoal is used in a lot of water filters. It's great at first, but again, it can harbor bacteria and mold. And an old water filter can actually be more harmful to your health than just drinking tap water because you're getting exposed to more bacteria. So most manufacturers recommend changing your filter, your water filter, and your Brita pitcher every 3 months. But again, follow your manufacturer's instructions. And I'm inviting other folks to leave a comment if there's another type of filter maybe you should consider filtering this season. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Great advice. And now we know what a MERV does in terms of how we figure out filtering your filter. So thank you very much. We appreciate you. We're going to move now to our equity moment and welcome back Troy Hudson, who is the Director of Energy Equity for PSE. So Troy, I'm going to give you the opportunity for the equity moment.
Thanks, Rose. We were, part of the reason why we're all here is that the UTC has given us this framework to follow in terms of equity and energy equity. So this is a framework that was originally developed by the University of Michigan. So I'm going to use it as a way to frame some of the conversations today. I'll be speaking a little bit more to it in my presentation later. But the way to approach the framework, one of the ways I approach the framework is starting with the bottom left, restorative justice. And I think of restorative justice as the why. Why are we focusing on energy equity? Why do we care about energy justice? And then, sort of in this case, we have some legislation, we have some regulatory requirements, and then we are examining our policies and our practices as we go forward. Moving on to the one above that. So now on the top left, it's recognition justice. And I think of recognition justice as about the who. So who are those communities that have been disadvantaged in the past? And we have lots of different definitions that we've been given through different legislation and different requirements. We have named communities, disadvantaged, overburdened. We've been looking at the deepest need. And so these are sort of all identifying that there are certain groups who have been underrepresented at the table. And how do we identify those groups so that we can then move on to the top right, procedural justice. And procedural justice I see as the how. How do you engage with those communities? How do you bring them into conversations so that they can be included in the conversation and recognize the need to meet individuals and communities where they are. My wife would interpret this as me spending a lot more Saturdays and evenings as a way of demonstrating procedural justice. And this group has been masterful at modeling, the EAG has been masterful at modeling for those of us at PSE, how to practice procedural justice. And then I'll end on the bottom right with distributional justice. And this is about the what. And this is about making sure that the communities we've identified under recognition are getting an equitable share of the benefits of the clean energy transition, and that we're not saddling them with too much of the burden of the transition. And once again, we have different suggestions there. The federal government says 40% under the Justice 40 initiative. The Climate Commitment Act says 35%. The CEIP on the CETA says 30%. I think everyone is agreeing that we should provide quantifiable benefits. And so keep this in mind, this framework in mind as we go through the rest of the evening, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Back to you, Rose.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you very much. Again, underscoring the importance of this framework as we move through our discussions. Let me take a moment to welcome those who may be joining us through our live streams with the YouTube channel. As I've indicated in the past, there will be very specific guidance for you in the event that you would like to offer comments. Please stay tuned. We have 2 opportunities for you through both a Zoom link and a call-in link, and we will provide you with those details as a little later in our agenda. So let us move through the objectives for today. Here's our agenda. As you can see, we have 2 presentations and an update from PSE. We have a presentation on our delivery system planning, and we have a presentation on non-energy impacts. I think it's important for us to gain an understanding of how the company is looking at non-energy impacts. And importantly, when we hear from the team from the system planning division, they're going to also provide you with some understanding of how your feedback has been integrated into that conversation. And then, as Troy mentioned, we'll conclude with his update on energy equity and move through our public comment to conclusion of the meeting. Next slide, please. So as I've indicated, here are our objectives. Really looking forward to learning a little more about what we consider non-energy impacts, and then an update on the feedback from the delivery system planning effort. Next slide, please. So let me turn it over to our PSE team, Kara Durbin and Ray Outlaw, for the updates this evening. I'm not sure who's going to start, but let me say maybe we'll start with Ray.
Rose, can you go to the next slide? I think it's going to be me, and then I will
Oh.
pass to Ray. We just want to keep
Very
you on your
good.
toes. So
Thank you.
And I figured out the mute button, so I'm already in good shape. So
This is good.
thanks, Rose. So I just wanted to acknowledge it, provide a couple of brief updates. The first one is that PSE is very pleased to report that we submitted our biennial CEIP update the week before last on November 1st, which is just a great place to be. And, you know, we really want to thank you all so much for your engagement on the biennial update. And you really contributed in a number of ways to shape that work. And one area in particular I want to mention is the significant role you all played alongside our other advisory groups in, as Troy mentioned, in influencing our thinking around energy benefits, how we define deepest need, and then going a step further and creating a minimum designation for those in deepest need. You all met 3 times in the lovely month of August, a month that you ordinarily have off on our schedule, and participated in those joint conversations and another joint advisory group conversation in September. So I just want to sincerely thank all of you for your thoughtfulness, for making that time, for the input you provided. We really tried to capture that, those themes and what we heard in the biennial update, and how it influenced the working definition of deepest need that we arrived at, and the ultimate, at least for now, minimum designation of 2.5% for deepest need for at least the remainder of this CEIP period. Knowing we hope to go beyond that percentage in some areas potentially. So really just wanted to thank you all for that. We couldn't have done this without you. And so we're at this point, from where now that the biennial update has been filed with the commission, so they have it now. Late last week, they issued a notice, which started the comment period on our biennial update. And so we look forward to reviewing those comments in the commission docket as they come in. I believe we'll put some more details in the chat, but comments will be accepted through January 11th, I believe is the deadline there. And then, and it looks like I remembered that correctly, thanks Kim. So then it's up to the commission to review and take action on our biennial update. And so we're hopeful that will take place sometime early next year, and we can move through their process and get a decision. And so perhaps we can flip back to the earlier slide, and I'll talk a little bit about looking ahead to 2024. While the biennial update will be pending with the commission for a little while, we're certainly not in a holding pattern by any means. We have plenty to work on in terms of addressing the conditions in the commission's order from June, some of which were applicable to the biennial, but others were more applicable for as we develop the next CEIP. And so we'll continue to work on those. We will continue to procure new clean energy resources to fulfill our clean energy targets. We will continue to work on how we refine our existing programs to better meet our needs and develop new programs. And before long, and we'll continue our focus on advancing equity with all of you in the work that we do. And then finally, before we know it, we'll be working in earnest on the next CEIP, the 2025 CIP. which will cover the 2026 to 2029 period. I promise you I won't come in January and say we're starting that CIP already. We have a chance to catch our breath, but just know that we will be working behind the scenes on the resource planning process that ultimately informs that next clean energy plan. So that's a little bit of an update in terms of where things stand with the biennial. There's one more thing I want to note in terms of a follow-up item, and then I will pass it to Ray for the next couple of slides. It's not listed here, but I wanted to touch a little bit and circle back to a letter of support that you all helped us with related to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA. This is a letter you so kindly put together in support for funding earlier this year. And the competition for those IIJA grants turned out to be pretty fierce. I think there were over 700 applications received by DOE, excuse me. And the list of winning applications came out in mid-October, and unfortunately, none of the projects that PSE put forward were selected, at least for this round of funding. There will be 2 more rounds of funding expected for the IIJA, both in grid flexibility and grid resilience. And so we look forward to seeing those and do intend to pursue those opportunities. And so don't have any details of timing or what that may look like. Just wanted to let you know the status of where we were at with that initial round, and that we may be circling back to you to see if there would be interest in indicating support again if we get to that point with applying for future rounds of funding. So thank you for that help and support. We weren't successful this time. We still hope there will be other opportunities. So that's just a quick update on IIJA. Happy to take any questions if there are any. Otherwise, I'll pass it to Ray to provide a few more updates before we get into the rest of our agenda.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, Ray, we're going to turn to you, and then when you're done, I have
Rose,
one.
I actually see a hand up from Marco, if you don't mind. It might not be on your screen just yet.
Yeah, thank you, Marco. Please go ahead.
Any specific reasons given to us yet, Marco? I'll if I learn anything more from the team working directly on that, once the dust settles, they may be able to find out a little bit more informally from their counterparts at the feds if there was anything in particular. I just know that 700 applications, only 58 selected, nationwide. That's pretty competitive. We felt like we had a strong application, but hopefully there will be some lessons learned on sort of, okay, for the ones that won, what really stood out for them? Where were they stronger, where we didn't feel like we were, that hopefully can inform how we position ourselves the next time. So if I learn anything more, I'm happy to pass it along. But for now, we just know we weren't really on that list. We don't quite have the story of why just yet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, do we see any other hands?
I see
any other
Amy's
questions?
as well.
All right, Amy.
Good to see you all tonight. Next slide, please. All right. One quick update. I think it was Dennis at the steering committee meeting, but Dennis, if it wasn't you, I won't quote you. You were asking about a BDR update, bill discount rate update from the last presentation. I just want to share that I reached out to them today actually and got a new number. They have over 12,000 signups for the bill discount rate since the program went into effect just under 6 weeks ago. So they're making a lot of progress really quick, improving the program and the opportunities to interact with customers as they go. So I just wanted to share that number with you. We hope to have that team come back next year and maybe share some lessons learned, but I thought you might be interested in hearing that update. Other steering committee updates. So when you got emails from Lisa in the last few weeks about end of year check-ins, if you haven't responded, please do so we can get you scheduled. And I know at least one person that's not going to happen until January or February. That's okay. Just let us know what works for you. You should have gotten a presentation, a file attachment that's a presentation in that packet of the feedback that we heard last year. It's a summary of the feedback from last year. I would love for you to take a look at that feedback and maybe just a tiny bit of homework before we chat with you for the end of year this year, and bring some of those thoughts to those conversations. I also want to note that we have been really focused, especially the last 3 months when we were working on deepest need and the biennial update, on the feedback reports that are essentially an appendix to your meeting summaries. Those have really been, they serve a couple of purposes. One, they help us make sure that we're recording your feedback properly and responding to your feedback. Those are also attachments to the biennial update to the CEIP to let the commission see how we're responding to your feedback. So I would appreciate it as those come in and you have time to take a look and make sure that if you shared something that you want to make sure that we captured it correctly. If we didn't get it correct, you can absolutely let us know and we'll get it corrected. Or if you have follow-up questions following how we responded, please let us know. We really do want to make sure we're hearing your feedback, that we understand what you said and that we're reflecting it properly and responding in our meeting summaries. So that was a point of emphasis all year. We heard that feedback at the end of 2022. We heard that more during the steering committee this week. So we're also, as we look ahead to 2024, thinking about how do we adjust our approach? How do we change how we document meetings, how we approach meetings, how we approach conversations with you? So again, be sure that we're capturing that feedback well and thoroughly. One thing we're going to do for January, you get December off, remember, we're going to have a year in review kind of conversation where we hope to bring back each of the topics in a brief summary of what did we talk about, where is it at in the cycle, and how did your feedback impact those conversations. So that's one thing we hope to do. And again, we're going to use these end of year conversations to really help frame our goals going forward. Much like last year, your conversations with us, we're going to take notes, but try to keep them fairly unstructured and let you drive those end of your conversations where you'd like the conversations to go. We'll provide a summary again for all members to see, but we also want to give you the space and freedom to say whatever it is you need to say, and we won't be in the summary, attributing specific quotes or specific thoughts to any individual person. So again, focused on improved feedback loop about topics and progress is a big emphasis for it was this year and will continue to be next year. We're scheduling those year-end check-ins soon. I think Lisa has heard from the majority of you, but still a few more that we want to hear from. And then the last thing we're working on is that work plan for 2024. I'd love to say it's going to be a nice late year. It is in between the biennial update cycles, but we have plenty of topics to talk about. So we'll be coming back refreshed in January with some interesting things for you all to engage in. So looking ahead, what do we think on the agenda? We've heard an interest in hearing an update on the Climate Commitment Act. So that's on the to-do list. The bill discount rate program that we just talked about, the education and outreach interest potentially with a subcommittee, an update on the CEIP, the biennial update as it progresses through the commission process. There's also some internal interest in additional equity forums, so we'd love to talk to you about that. Dennis and others of the steering committee reminded us that there's a need for training and education for EAG members, especially new members as they come on board. So we're thinking about how can we use this coming year to better onboard new members, and as we start a new cycle and perhaps have a few new members come spring and summer, how do we better get them up to speed? So that's on our list. And then potentially a field trip. I know we tried to get to the load office this year and that didn't work out. So let's get through storm season and revisit that idea. So those are a few things on the list. I'm sure there will be many others as we head into next year. One last note, I just want to flag, we sent out an equity forum summary draft. It was about 2 weeks ago now. If you have had a chance to look at that, great. If you haven't, if you could, please let us know if you have any feedback. As soon as possible this week, if you could get back to us Wednesday or Thursday, that would be ideal. We'd love to get that out to the attendees on Friday so that we get it ahead of any holiday time off that folks are taking and get it in their inboxes. And there are still some action items we're flagging within the equity forum process. C in particular, has asked us about a collaboration space to potentially connect participants in a longer term way. So just flagging that that's on our to-do list to research further and come back and talk to you all again. And Rose, I think that's it, unless there are questions. I'm just checking the chat to make sure there are no questions in the chat.
Yes, and if you have questions, as usual, the raise hand function or the chat. I do have a couple of updates. First off, before we move into our presentations, I think we owe a huge thank you to Sharon. Sharon, I believe that this is your last meeting, and Sharon is one of the original inaugural members of the Equity Advisory Group. I think we all remember how helpful she was in sharing her lived experience, both professionally and otherwise, with us, to help us really appreciate the range of issues that we needed to consider and how equity affects a variety of communities, particularly those of us who've reached a certain age. But the contributions that you've made are so appreciated, Sharon. You know you'll be missed, but you'll always be a part of this team and this community. And we want to thank you again very much for everything that you've done to elevate and make this conversation an outstanding one. I know I didn't prep you on this, but if you'd like to come off mute and say a couple of things, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, thank you, Rose. It's been really just a privilege to be a part of it from the get-go and to watch the maturation of this group and of PSE around such important issues that have grounded many things that I've been involved in since, well, for a very long time, but particularly since 2007. And I just want to thank everybody, and I'm excited about who's here, who's already contributing. So it feels like a good moment for me to say thank you, and I'll move on. I'm going to be moving to Alaska in about a year, and I hope to be doing something up there similarly. So if any of you have some contacts in Alaska that you want to share with me, either from PSE or others of you related to these issues, feel free to get in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We hope you enjoy your time in Alaska. And again, so grateful to you for all that you've done to help stand up the EAG. We've also been notified of another change. Everly has indicated that she will be transitioning. They'll be transitioning the representation for Utopia. And I believe we have a new member with us on screen. I think it's Amasai. And if I'm mispronouncing that, I promise I will correct it the next time. And if you are on screen, if you could come off mute and just give us a wave. I'm not seeing anyone. Can anybody else see a reference there? Well, maybe they'll.
I don't see them, Rose. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we just want to make sure that you all are aware of that transition. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to extend our thanks to Everly as well. Okay, then we're going to move on to our presentations. Well, I guess not. We're going to do something else, and let me see who's going to be responsible.
I got
for
it,
that.
Rose.
Is that you, Ray?
One more, yes.
Okay.
I'll make this quick. I know we're starting to run behind schedule. So
you.
you all participated in a poll at the last meeting and following the last meeting about dates and days for meetings next year. You resoundingly suggested we move away from Mondays over to Tuesdays. That was both the day that was most preferred and how do I say this, least not preferred. So these are the dates that we're looking at for next year based on the availability of the most members. We wanted to throw those up there just in case you have questions about the dates, or I don't think there are any holidays on there, but if you see a holiday that we're missing, let us know. Lisa will be sending out invites both for the regular meeting dates and steering committee dates in the coming days.
Okay. If you have questions on this, I'm sure we can provide you with this separately, or you can take quick notes. but these are the dates for 2024. All right, now I think we're going to move on. And Casey, thank you so much for your patience. I'd like to welcome you. Casey is a senior market analyst for PSE, and Casey is going to provide us with an update on our non-energy impact. So welcome.
Thank you very much. You hear me okay?
Hear you fine.
Great. So again, my name is Casey Curtis. I'm with the with PSE Strategic Planning, Evaluation, and Research Team, and we are a support function for our energy efficiency program. So we conduct evaluations on our programs to make sure we're achieving the savings that we're claiming. We do cost effectiveness tests to ensure that our investments are cost effective, and we do various market analyses and research in support of the programs. So today we're here to talk about non-energy impacts, or what are sometimes called non-energy benefits. And the reason we're talking about them is because they're an important part of how we value the benefits of our energy efficiency programs. Next slide, please. In fact, the Washington State Utility Commission finds them to be valuable as well, which is why in 2019, they added a condition to our biennial conservation plan requiring us to identify, research, and properly value non-energy impacts, or what we call non-NEIs, is how I'll probably refer to them. Next slide. And their interest continues today. So 2 years later in 2021, they set conditions to our 22-23 biennial conservation plan. They asked us to continue to identify, research, and properly value NEIs, and include the requirement to consult with our conservation resource advisory groups and our equity advisory group. So I'm hoping that this presentation is the first introduction to an issue that we may discuss well into the future, as it has ramifications for equity and how we value and measure it. Next slide, please. So what are non-energy impacts, or NEIs? And I should say forward, this can be a somewhat technical and a bit wonky of a topic. So I've tried to make this presentation for a general audience. I'll ask your forbearance as I may speak over or under your level of comfort with this topic at any time. We'll have a discussion time at the end where we can ask questions, and feel free to put them in the chat as well. But NEIs, briefly, non-energy impacts, briefly, they are the quantifiable dollar impacts that result from energy efficiency projects that aren't already accounted for in our avoided costs. And avoided costs are essentially the cost of all the energy we save, right? So the column on the left in the presentation are the categories of our avoided costs, where we have the actual commodity cost of the energy. We have capacity cost savings, which includes generation. We have transmission and distribution benefits, and greenhouse gas savings, or the social cost of greenhouse gas, which is an EPA estimate of the dollar impacts across society that result from a per unit of greenhouse gas emissions. In the column on the right are examples of non-energy impacts, which might include the benefits from reduced air pollution or water savings, increased comfort, and other benefits not directly tied to the avoided costs of energy or capacity. So let me get more specific with an example. Next slide, please. PSE's energy efficiency portfolio includes programs which concentrate on different market segments. So our weatherization program, for example, uses what we call measures, which are the specific type of energy efficiency project being implemented. So our weatherization program implements an air sealing measure that, in this example, reduces heating losses, which reduces the heating load and thereby lowers the energy costs. But in addition to that, there are all kinds of benefits that come out of a nicely sealed up house. It's more comfortable, there's less noise intrusion, you don't have to use secondary heating fuels like wood fires, and your HVAC system is going to have a longer life. And those are the kind of benefits that we're trying to capture with non-energy impacts. So how do we do that? Next slide. I'm going to use an example of how we do it. At PSE, our energy efficiency portfolio has to pass a cost effectiveness threshold called the total resource cost test, or TRC. And it's a benefit cost equation where the total value of all the benefits go in the numerator, all the costs go in the denominator. So long as the result of that ratio is 1 or better, we call it cost effective. A simple version of the calculation is below, where all the benefits of a lifetime of energy efficiency project goes into the numerator, and then the cost of installation and the program administration goes in the denominator. The tricky part is that while all the costs are first-year costs, the benefits last many years, sometimes as long as 40 years. When you seal up your house, it doesn't just all go away after 1 year, it lasts for a long time. So to set everything to first year for comparison, we calculate the net present value of all benefits by discounting future years by our discount rate. And I just say this so the math doesn't get confusing. If you have $10 of benefit over 10 years, the total benefit is not going to be $100. It's going to be more like $75 after you discount the future value. I don't expect everyone to become financial experts today. That's just understand that we set everything into first year dollars for the cost benefit comparison. Next slide. Here's an example of why NEIs can be important to measuring energy efficiency. So take an example of some generic energy efficiency measure that costs $1,000 to install, but will save $150 a year in avoided energy costs, and is expected to save $40 a year in water savings. So this is common with things like energy efficient dishwashers and clothes washers, which often save both energy and water. As you can see, after we take the net present value of 10 years of benefits, both avoided energy and NEIs, we compare it to the costs, we have a score of 1.23. It's $1,400 over $1,150. It's over 1. We call this measure cost effective, and it will be one of the measures we deploy. However, next slide. Let's say if we weren't accounting for the non-energy impacts and only measure the avoided energy cost of the project. In that case, the benefits might sum to $1,115, which is less than the total cost, yields a total resource cost test score of 0.97. Now, this might be a project that we then decline to do because it won't be considered cost effective. We're measured on our total portfolio, so a mix of high TRC and low TRC projects can all be included, but our whole portfolio still has to have a TRC above 1 or above at the end of the year. So NEIs can make a big difference when it comes to assessing the cost effectiveness of energy efficiency because we're including benefits that can be hard to otherwise capture. Next slide. So how do we arrive at these NEI values? I highlight here 3 ways that these are typically derived. First is direct measurement. If you have energy saves, like the water example I gave you, you have gallons per year that you can save. You can multiply that by your water and sewer rates. Direct measurement, that's easy. Modeling is another one we can do for things like air pollution. There are models from the EPA that allow us to determine a value and put a dollar amount on avoided health impacts resulting from air pollution. And finally, we might do surveys like particularly the ranked choice or ranked preference surveys, which are designed to lead interviewees to assess the value of relative benefits. It's a bit technical, but the point I'm trying to make is that there are a number of ways we're trying to account for the full value of these benefits from energy efficiency. We know the answer is not 0, right? If you have better lighting in space, that's valuable to you. The question is, how do you quantify it and how do you monetize that value and include it? But we can't ignore it because the effect of that is to undervalue energy efficiency compared to other resources. Next slide, please. So that leads to a project that we started in 2020 and finished in 2021, whereby the 3 Washington investor-owned utilities, PSE, Vista, and PacifiCorp, partnered together with a consultant who had compiled a database of NEIs from utilities across North America. And they established a methodology to transfer those NEIs to PSE. So that project resulted in new NEIs being applied to about 780 of our energy efficiency measures. And the NEI values themselves included lots of different categories like the ones you see listed right there. Everything's from subjective values to thermal comfort to productivity improvements in the commercial sector. And as a result, NEIs make up a larger portion of our overall benefits. For example, our 24-25 biennial plan, which we have just submitted, the lifetime cost savings benefit from energy efficiency, just the avoided cost savings, is expected to be about $470 million. That's over the lifetime of all the benefits, while the NEIs that we use will yield about $32 million in lifetime benefits, so about 6 to 7% of the total energy efficiency benefit. Next slide, please. And NEIs remain a subject of great interest to the Washington State Utility Commission. In 2022, they opened a docket, which PSE participated in, which had the goal of coming up with a Washington State specific cost test that would not only apply to all demand side resources like energy efficiency, but would also incorporate many of these hard to measure benefits that utilities may or may not be counting today. This work is ongoing. PSE is eager to be a part of this work because we think it's important as we try to incorporate things like decarbonization and electrification as a focus of our future efforts. The next slide, please. And this work can be challenging for some of the reasons I've listed here. Some NEIs are negative, and to maintain accuracy and the integrity of our cost-benefit reporting, we need to include them, even if they're negative. Many of the benefits of energy efficiency can be hard to quantify, like some examples I've given. And there's a couple examples there, some that are relatively simple and some that are more complex. There's a lot of subjectivity to many of the NEIs, such that one study might yield one value and the next might yield a different value depending on the population that they're surveying. And of course, we have to consider the cost of the research and whether the value we get out of those NEIs is a good value to our ratepayers. Finally, we're still trying to figure out how to allocate NEI impacts across different populations, because we recognize that some values may be more impactful to one population than another. Yeah, next slide, please. So quick recap. We talked about NEIs, what they are, what they do for us in energy efficiency and why we're talking about them, and some of the challenges that we face in trying to determine their value. But this is an ongoing effort and it's important. And we'd like to see Washington State have a consistent framework for accounting for these benefits and to make sure we're not overlooking anything when it comes to valuing energy efficiency. Next slide, please. Finally, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the subject. If not today, then take it home, think about it, come back with any questions you might have. We'd like to know what you think about the concepts we talked about today, how you think it impacts the important work this group is doing. Yeah, we'd welcome any feedback, like I said, today or in the future. And that is my presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Casey. Very helpful. We did have one question in the chat for Monica around health benefits. If you could respond to that. And then if others have questions on the presentation, this is your time to discuss that with Casey. I want to move into our conversation around delivery system planning. And I'd like to welcome Corey Colbert, and he'll be joined by Nisi Weatherby. But Corey, I'm going to turn it over to you as you reflect on the progress of integrating the feedback that's come from the EAG and the work that you're doing. So welcome, Corey.
Thanks, Rose. I'm Corey Corbett. I'm one of the managers in the Delivery System Planning Organization. I'm also here with Nisi Weatherby, another one of the managers in Delivery System Planning. Believe she's presented at a couple of prior EAG meetings. And then we're here, as Rose mentioned, to talk about delivery system planning and how we incorporated feedback from the EAG into that process. So I wanted to just start, next slide, please. I just wanted to start off with giving a definition of the energy delivery system and delivery system planning to just baseline. I know there's new EAG members that may not have been in some of those previous conversations. But when we talk about the energy delivery system, we're really just talking about the infrastructure between the generation source to the customer home or building. And so that's the transmission lines, the substations, the distribution lines, transformers, really all the infrastructure that connects the energy source to a customer's home or facility. And then when we talk about delivery system planning, that's really our financial and engineering planning process that we use to look at investments to that energy delivery system. So those might be more maintenance, they could be upgrade projects, or they may be new equipment as part of that delivery system planning process. Another thing I wanted to mention as well is that typically when we talk delivery system planning, we're about 2 to 3 years out before construction occurs. And a big reason for that is related to the handoff that goes over to our project management organization to build the work that planning plans. So there's a lot of time related to the specific design, the engineering, the permitting, procurement, and the construction timeline. So for instance, this year in 2023, we were building what we call our portfolios for 2025, and that work was completed at the end of the summer, so in August. And then currently we're working to finalize what we call our 2026 portfolio of projects that will get handed over to that project management organization. So again, just wanted to start off with a couple definitions before I went into the why we're here this evening. Next slide, please. And the why we're here, this update relates to a few previous conversations that we've had with the EAG, one at the end of 2022, almost a year ago today, and then one in March. And it relates back to a condition in our general rate case from 2022 that discussed engaging and collaborating with the EAG to talk about how equity could be incorporated into our investment decision tool for delivery system planning. And then we also wanted to follow up on those two previous conversations with the EAG and talk about how that feedback was incorporated, as well as what the results were for our 2025 portfolio. So I'm going to hand it over to Nisi, and she's going to talk a little bit about what we heard previously and what the results were for 2025.
Thanks, Corey. So the last time I talked to you, or talked to this group, we talked about an overview of how we were going to incorporate equity into the portfolio runs. We discussed how we were going to keep our traditional cost-benefit analysis on its own, but then we were going to add equity as a second layer, and so we would do our optimization, and then we would look with the equity layer. And the equity layer was built off of the customer benefit indicators that you all had worked with on the CETA. In that meeting, we walked away with several key concepts. It was a very eye-opening meeting for me, and I really appreciated your time. We walked away with a better understanding of equity versus equality. I know that may sound silly, but in our minds, we were grappling with that a little bit, and it became very clear that if it applies to everyone, it's equality, it's not equity. The project that that the community that we're doing the construction in, they need to actually get the benefits of that, especially if I'm in a low-income community, and that the overall portfolio should achieve the desired targets for equity advancement. We also learned that we have been very focused on distributional equity, but we needed to look broader where appropriate. And we needed to make sure that we could show our data and assumptions and be transparent as we went along. We then took that information and incorporated it into our analysis, and I promised you all we would come back and share the results. You may not remember that, but I did, so that's why we're here. As we were scoping the project, so we started with how we scoped the project. For something to qualify as an equity project, we had determined that 30% of the investment needed to directly benefit the named community. Now, that was our starting point. Over time, we may change that, but I think we were leveraging the idea that you wanted 30% of your portfolio or higher, so we went with 30% of the investment needed to benefit. We had some programs that we entered in. An example would be our cable remediation, where we have a lot of projects, so we don't enter them project by project. We split them in half, and we had the projects that were in the named community versus those that were not. We then made sure we captured information on which of our customer benefit indicators were impacted by each project or program. And we also included the number of highly impacted customers, as well as the vulnerable population. And then we ran the optimization on its own. Then we overlaid the equity results like we said we would, and we looked at that and we made adjustments as needed. And what you'll see there is, as an example, the results that we actually came up with for our portfolio was that 40% of our electric portfolio impacts positively invest in a named community. I know I just hit you with a lot of information. My next piece is Corey is going to walk you through a pilot on how we expanded from just the distributional to some of those other areas. But before I hand it off to him, I just want to pause and see if there are any questions. Hand it over to you.
Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, some additional work I wanted to talk about in delivery system planning, kind of referencing back to Troy's energy justice framework. We're piloting a form of procedural justice around community engagement. I think on our infrastructure projects, we definitely engage with the community, but typically that's been later in the process. What's different is this is a little earlier in the process where one, we're trying to better understand customer needs as well as potential solutions that help address those needs. And within this pilot, I'm trying to develop a framework that the planning organization can use to implement and kind of implement on further portfolios and further projects as we develop 2027's work and other years' work. And so this specific pilot is in the Lake Young's area. It's around reliability or power outages. So really looking to try to reduce the number of power outages in the area. And we started with an online survey and postcards, as well as conversations with customers, approximately 200 customers. And then tried to use that information to just better understand how impactful those power outages were on the community, and then look beyond our maybe traditional solutions of tree wire or undergrounding, as well as looking at other solutions that may be available, like behind the meter batteries or community batteries, to help resolve the reliability issues for customers. I think that those are my main points on that slide. I might pause if there's any questions, or if not, move on to the next slide. And yeah, next steps, you know, as 2023 wraps up, we're going to continue, you know, kind of wrapping up that pilot engagement and using the tools and processes we learned to plan for 2024 on further engagements. We're also going to be incorporating some of the new energy equity data that's available from the CEIP update into our work for 2027. So again, in 2024, we'll be looking at the portfolio of projects for 2027 and developing that portfolio, but we'll be updating that investment decision process with kind of the latest information from the CEIP, as well as this community engagement information, and incorporating that into the decision-making process as well. And I would say our plan is to continue engagement with the EAG as we continue to evolve our process. That's my last slide, actually. So I maybe saw a question pop up.
Okay. Additional conversations as additional meetings are raised. I do see one quick question in the chat from steps are for 2023 and 2024, but now we're going to move into the next slide, which I think is the introduction for Troy Hudson, who is the Director of Energy Equity. So Troy, we'll turn it over to you.
Well, hello again, and so this is a continuation of my earlier equity moment slide that hopefully set the framework for some of the presentations today that you have heard, and then I'll sort of wrap that up. This is an update on where we are. We've been working on energy equity. I was able to put together a team starting in January, and we will be participating in the in any upcoming sort of GRC work that needs to happen going forward. And so this is just a summary of all of the things that we've learned so far, and open to any feedback along the way. Next slide. So going back to the framework, this is restorative. So the orientation here is to the restorative justice aspect. Two important parts of the why here. The public interest standard was expanded to include equity, which is key to a lot of the way in which the utility functions. And then the cascade order laying out that framework that I introduced you earlier. Next slide. This is another restorative justice slide. To orient you to this slide, to the left, we have the CETA, CEIP, and that was the first sort of, instruction from the commission for us to focus on equity. And with all the work that you supported and helped deliver around looking at community benefit indicators and other things like that. So you're familiar with that part of it. The center of the slide focuses on our last general rate case and some specific requirements that we're following there. There's a lot about distributional equity analysis. And you just heard a couple of presentations that looked at different use cases around how to do a distributional equity analysis at various levels of maturity. We're supposed to do a pilot around that. I'll speak to that more later. And then the corporate capital planning, you heard about delivery system planning. Those are all ones that will require a DE analysis. We have over 100 performance metrics that we're required to measure and report on. About 40 of those are equity related. And then we have the affordability use cases that have been mentioned earlier, the bill discount rate, arrearage management plan, increased bill assistance. And then the clean energy programs and energy management, the customer energy management programs, looking at increasing participation and distribution of benefits to named communities. One key one there is the targeted electrification pilot. I think that's a $15 million project. And then over to the right, you've heard about, we talked about earlier today, the IIJA grant applications, which exposed us and required that we follow in those applications the Justice 40 framework set by the federal government, the Department of Energy. The health, the HEAL Act from Washington State that looked at health impacts, health and environmental impacts, and then the Climate Commitment Act that set out some specific expectations around percentage of benefit as we transition to cleaner energy and set specific reduction targets. Next slide. So the last part that, the way we are prioritizing our work is focusing on where we have specific requirements, as I laid out earlier on the previous slide. And then we have the performance metrics that we have to report on. But the biggest part of our work is around looking at operationalizing equity across all of our operations. And so we've got dozens of different practices we're examining, and then trying to do an equity analysis and then incorporate equity into how we prioritize and how we make those decisions. An example that I wanted to just highlight that sort of fits within those dozens of different use cases. You read earlier about substation security. So we had some folks that were vandalizing substations, and we needed to develop a plan to, improve security at those substations. And, we looked at an equity analysis that said, where are the substations located in relation to named communities, which was, fairly easy for us to identify based on the data we have available. And then as part of the plan to improve security for all of the substations, we were able to prioritize substations that serve named communities. And that was an example of operationalizing a fairly straightforward one, but I just wanted to highlight that. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, when we looked at the recognition justice, and we have almost half a dozen different definitions for communities, one of the things that I heard when I met with this group for the first time in January was the need for us to be more transparent about what needed to happen, what we were going to do, and the communities where we're going to focus, and then more nimbly get to benefits so that we can show how this equity analysis is actually delivering meaningful benefits to communities. And so that's something that we wanted to prioritize. As we were sort of thinking about that, sort of two things happened. One of them is this team, the EAG, pushed us on, having these forums, these equity forums as a way to broaden our reach beyond the EAG, and so that you could hear from other members in the community that you are representing as part of the committee, as part of the group. And then the other thing is, when we looked at all of our data, all of the overlapping definitions and other things, we realized that based on that work, looking at some work with the University of Washington, the U.S. Forest Service, Civil Rights and Labor History Consortium that were looking at redlining and others. So, looking at heating maps, heat maps, and, other things around impacts to communities. We realized that, there's a sense that we already had an idea as to where within our service territory there were clusterings of the communities that we put different names on. And there's the Kent Valley was a big part of that we saw down at the bottom, left there, right. And that was an important one. And it's interesting that the Maple Valley example that Corey used sort of was right there in that community. And then we also, as where one of the EAG forums was held was in Renton, sort of capturing folks who were able to come from that area as well and serve communities in that area. We had a forum out in Skagit. Skagit is another area that showed up here. And, the forum in Mount Vernon, we had a really good turnout there and great conversations, learned a lot from the community there. The other areas that we're looking at are Pierce, and then so around the military bases there, Kitsap around the bases there, Kittitas across the mountains, and then any tribal area within our service territory by definition would be one of these areas. So we're trying to make this simpler for our teams to understand where they needed to prioritize and focus and orient themselves, because we are already providing power in these communities. and we're already engaging with customers in these areas through their bills and any other assistance, and the 150 or so different programs that we have to provide different levels of engagement. We have teams in these areas and other things like that. So it's one of the ways in which we're trying to orient this to make it more transparent and nimble. Next slide. So engagement. This is, I would say probably the most important part of all of this. Meaningful engagement, meeting people where they are, and providing that level of focus. So now we are looking at sort of procedural justice, and the equity forums I mentioned was a great way to model listening first. Spending a lot of time engaging with different organizations representing the community, representing these communities. And so you're seeing that the approach is really to meet people where they are. We're looking at the IAP squared and aspiring to follow the pilot that we're doing as part of one of our requirements around engaging with communities at the empower level. And so that's something that we're seeing. Interestingly enough, to C's question about the feedback, some of you will recognize when Corey shared the feedback from the Maple Valley area, similar to feedback we got when we were both at the Renton Forum and in the Skagit Forum, where it brought home to us that we have these agricultural use cases, and folks had great suggestions around that. But then we also had the ideas around, putting in some sort of microgrid, up in the Skagit area, and then potentially down in the Pierce County area. And, that was my first time going to those where I met some of you in person. And shout out to Marco for letting me put him in the spot on the spot out in Mount Vernon. He did a great job representing that community and being such a leader. C came to both events, and was a powerful partner and engaging with the folks who were there. Dennis and D'Amico provided some leadership through their speaking engagements in the Renton Forum. I think, Jenny, I saw you at the Mount Vernon Forum as well. And so thanks to all of you for showing up and, as I said, modeling procedural justice for us. And we learned a lot. There's a lot on the plate to do. And as Ray said, we're excited to talk about going forward and making these a more regular and meaningful occurrence going forward with a broader reach. And inviting folks from Corey's team and others to these events, I think, would be super helpful for all of us going forward. So like to thank you all for that. Next slide. Oh, and on the previous slide, I made a note to yeah, thank you, to mention that the UTC has started their equity docket, and the priority, the area they're going to start with is procedural justice. So there will be opportunities to engage around that as well. And I think I've said before, and I said in my introduction, my wife knows that I have a new focus at work because there's a lot of Saturdays, including this upcoming Saturday when I'm going to be speaking to the Asian Pacific American Council. We've spoken with the Governor's Equity Office as well, and like I said, lots of great conversations, lots of great evenings as well. Next slide. And then distributional justice. So I mentioned, the different percentages already, but let me talk a little bit about some work that we're doing with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab that was funded by the Department of Energy. There's a white paper that they're looking to publish focused on doing distributional equity analysis for distributed energy resource projects. And this is a national white paper. It'll be highlighting some of the work that has been done around restorative justice in Washington State as an example, and then some of our programs at PSE as a utility example as well. While we didn't get some of the DOE grants that were mentioned earlier, DOE did work to provide some funding to Lawrence Berkeley National Lab to partner with us on a pilot on how to actually then take this work from the white paper and implement it in a utility use case around DERs. And so that's something we're working on right now. I know you have received some information about this because we are recruiting a few members from the EAG to participate in the steering committee, oversight committee for this pilot. And once again, this is expected to be a national pilot that will, while it will provide guidance to Puget Sound Energy, it will also, and the UTC, once we do our filing around it, it will also be helpful for other utilities across the country. So that's something that's happening as well. And then the last thing I will say, the last slide, I think it's my last slide. So you've heard from Casey, Nisi, and Corey about customer energy management use case, and then the delivery system planning. And then the other one you saw on one of my earlier slides was the capital planning. So just for context, right? A key tool that we use in this utility business to make decisions and prioritize work and investments and other things is a cost-benefit analysis. And so this is something that we're trying to do, let the cost-benefit analysis run, and then do an equity analysis that's based on a combination of the community benefit indicators from CETA, and then this, what we're calling a cascade analysis, looking at the four justices, and then trying to identify portfolio and outcomes that provide measurable benefits to the communities that we would identify based on the different definitions that we can follow. And so you saw some great examples there, and this is something that is going to be key as we apply this to more and more applications. So with that, I think I will stop and see if there are any questions.